When you're finished making your final impression, you should check it to see that it's an acceptable impression. You should check to make sure that the thickness of the flanges is no more than 3 to 5 millimeters in thickness. There should be no large voids that need to be filled. There should be no areas of burn through of the tray. At least there should be no unacceptable burn through. And you should have recorded all the critical anatomy, in this case including the hamular notches and the vibrating line. The posterior palatal seal area should be captured. The impression should be trimmed to the back end of the vibrating line, and you should mark on the area that you need the posterior palatal seal. Overall, the impression should be as accurate a reproduction of the tissues as you can get. Here's another nice impression. You can see the frenal attachment areas looking very good on this impression. Overall, all the anatomy is being recorded. It needs to be trimmed off at the back here. We don't want to leave this excess material back here. Should trim it off right at the vibrating line, but overall a good impression. There should not be extensive areas of burn through, either against the tray or the border molding. In this case, there's some fairly broad burn through, but if you look at it from various angles, you can see that it's not sticking into the tissue. Perhaps over here a little bit, when you look from the side, it looks like it might have distorted the tissue a little bit. But if it's just broad contact, relatively small areas, and it's continuous in shape with the surrounding tissue, that can still work. Here's a couple of areas where the burn through is unacceptable. If you look from the side, you can actually see that the compound is sticking up and it's actually digging into the tissue and has actually distorted the shape of the tissue. That's what we don't want to see. We don't want to see the compound or the tray bulging into the tissue surface. Likewise, if you have areas of excessive burn through, these are not acceptable. This one has a number of problems. There's extensive burn through all over the ridge, and the flange thickness is much thicker than the 3 to 5 millimeters that we normally want to see in the flange area. Here's another impression that has extremely wide flanges. There's some voids right on the area where we want our seal, and it looks like we've missed capturing some of the vestibular area in the anterior. There's also a large gap in the area around the posterior palatal seal area. That's just not going to work. A small bubble in the surface of the impression, like you see here, is insignificant. A large void, like you see in the middle of the palate here, is significant. That will either have to be repaired or the impression remade. Here's another impression where we have extensive burn through, very broad, very heavy, and look at how wide this flange area is. That's a totally distorted vestibule. That won't work.